open up the intricate rules of their society, but also, I think more importantly, the inner lives of these characters, the choices they make within that world.
Right. So our mission here is to go beyond just the plot points and really dig into what these moments tell us about the characters, their world, and maybe some of those insights that still feel relevant today.
Exactly. We're going to rejoin the Bennet family. Mrs. Bennet, always anxious.
Oh.
Mr. Bennet with his dry wit, lovely Jane, our heroine, Elizabeth, of course, and young Lydia, and we'll track Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy.
Definitely less agreeable at first, anyway.
And Bingley's sisters, plus we meet Mr. Collins and the seemingly charming Mr. Wickham.
It's quite a cast, and every interaction, every line almost seems to add another layer, doesn't it?
It really does. So let's pick up right as the news of Bingley and Darcy hits the neighborhood. And Mrs. Bennet, well, she's immediately activated.
Activated is a good word. Her focus is instant. Introductions. For marriage, Elizabeth mentions Mrs. Long might introduce them.
But Mrs. Bennet, nope, straight to suspicion. I do not believe Mrs. Long will do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own. She is a selfish, hypocritical woman, and I have no opinion of her.
Just like that. Based purely on her own anxiety about getting her daughters married off. And Mr. Bennet, oh, he just stirs the pot, doesn't he? No more have I, and I'm glad to find that you do not depend on her serving you.
He finds the whole thing so amusing. And you see that dynamic right away. Her sort of near panic about marriage and him just observing it all with this detached wit.
And her nerves spill over onto the girls, too. Poor Kitty gets scolded for coughing. Don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sake. Have a little compassion on my nerves. You tear them to pieces.
The famous nerves. Yeah, it's like even a cough is a threat to her social project. But then Mr. Bennet, after winding her up, actually does something. He dismisses the formal introduction stuff as nonsense, but then says he'll just go visit Bingley himself.
Bypasses the whole drama, and Mrs. Bennet's reaction is just pure relief and excitement. How good it was in you, my dear Mr. Bennet. It is such a good joke, too.
Yeah, she's thrilled. And his parting shot to Kitty, now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you choose. He leaves Mrs. Bennet in her moment of triumph.
But it doesn't last long before she's back to planning, does it?
Oh, immediately. Straight back to the assembly ball. What an excellent father you have, girls. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you. It's all about the end game. Husbands.
Absolutely. That pressure, especially given their financial situation with the entailment, it just drives everything she does. And speaking of the assembly, there's that initial scare about 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen coming with Bingley.
Right, more competition. But they get over that. And at the ball itself, Netherfield, we get those iconic first impressions. Bingley, totally charming, finds so many pleasant girls.
He seems genuinely happy to be there. Darcy, though, not so much.
Well, he notices Jane. Bingley points her out, calls her the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. And Darcy agrees she's dancing with the only handsome girl in the room. So Jane makes a good impression.
But then Bingley tries to get him interested in Elizabeth. Says she's very pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. And Darcy's response, oof.
Yeah, it's brutal. He looks her over and says, she is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me.
And I am in no humor at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men, and Elizabeth hears it.
Of course she does.
Yeah.
And naturally, she's left with no very cordial feelings towards him. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Right. But what's interesting is her reaction afterwards. The source says she has this lively, playful disposition, so she tells the story later with great spirit.
And that's so key to understanding Elizabeth early on. Yes, she's insulted, deeply, but she doesn't crumble. She processes it, uses her wit, turns it into almost a joke. It's resilience.
It really sets her apart. There's also that little bit with the Lucas boy, right? About Darcy's money.
Oh, yeah. If I were as rich as Mr. Darcy, I should drink a bottle of wine every day.
And Mrs. Bennet immediately jumps in to scold him about drinking too much. Even at a ball, she's policing propriety.
Always on duty. So these visits continue between the families. And Bingley's sisters, Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley, they're forming opinions. They like Jane's manners, but find Mrs. Bennet intolerable and the younger girls not worth speaking to, though they want to know Jane and Elizabeth better.
It's pure snobbery, really. Elizabeth sees their superciliousness. Jane, bless her, is more positive, sees their attention as a greatest pleasure.
And this difference is crucial. Jane is falling for Bingley, but she's so composed, so cheerful on the surface, that her feelings are not likely to be discovered by the world in general.
Her reserve hides how deep her feelings actually are, which is where Charlotte Lucas comes in with a very different take.
Right. Charlotte tells Elizabeth that being too guarded can be a disadvantage.
Yeah, she says if a woman conceals her affection, she may lose the opportunity of fixing him. She thinks women should maybe show more affection than she feels.
It's a really pragmatic, almost calculated view of the marriage market. For Charlotte, it's about securing that establishment. It's a necessity for women like them, these well-educated young women of small fortune, because marriage is pretty much their only path to financial security.
It really highlights the pressure cooker they're all in, doesn't it? Beneath all the dances and visits. We also see more of the Bingley sisters' attitude. Elizabeth says Darcy is polite, and they agree, but sort of imply it's only because he's dancing with Jane.
Totally passive-aggressive. And later, Miss Bingley complains to Darcy about the locals, their insipidity, noise, nothingness, self-importance, just dripping with condescension.
Which just reinforces Elizabeth's dislike of them, and by extension, Darcy at this point. Meanwhile, Lydia and Kitty have found a new obsession.
Oh, the officers. Yes, the regiment arrives in Meryton, and suddenly Bingley's fortune is worthless when opposed to the regimentals of an ensign.
They're constantly running off to their Aunt Phillips for gossip. And then the main attraction arrives. Mr. Wickham.
Introduced by Mr. Denny. And he immediately overshadows everyone else. The other officers become stupid, disagreeable fellows overnight.
Wickham is instantly charming. Elizabeth talks him at Mrs. Phillips's party, and, well, she's captivated. Finds him far beyond them all.
But just before that key conversation, there's another telling incident. Elizabeth walks miles to Netherfield because Jane is sick. She arrives looking, flushed and probably a bit muddy. Weary ankles, dirty stockings.
And how do the Bingley sisters react?
With utter disdain. Looked almost wild, scampering about the country. Her hair so untidy, so blousy. Just pure superficial judgment. They can't see the genuine sisterly concern.
And during that same visit, Darcy gives his definition of an accomplished woman. And Elizabeth challenges him, saying, "You must comprehend a great deal in your idea." A little spark of their future sparring, maybe.
Perhaps. But right now, her prejudice is about to get a massive boost from Wickham. In that conversation at Mrs. Phillips's, he tells her his side of the story with Darcy.
The sob story.
Pretty much. Claims Darcy cheated him out of a church living promised by Darcy's father. Paints Darcy as proud, influenced by his dictatorial and insolent aunt, Lady Catherine.
Lady Catherine. We'll meet her later.
Yes. And Wickham says Darcy's power comes just from rank and fortune.
And Elizabeth already disliking Darcy intensely.
She completely believes him, finds it difficult indeed, it's distressing. One does not know what to think. It perfectly confirms her negative view.
Jane, however, is a bit more cautious, isn't she? Suggests maybe Wickham was imposed on, showing her usual charitable perspective.
Exactly. Always willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so amidst all this, a new figure arrives at Longbourn. Mr. Collins.
Oh, Mr. Collins. The sources don't mince words about him, do they? Not a sensible man. Deficiency of nature. Little assisted by education or society. A mixture of pride and obsequiousness, self-importance and humility.
Nailed it. And he comes with a very specific plan. Marry one of the Bennet girls. Is his way of making amends of atonement for inheriting their father's estate.
Right, because of that entailment. Since Mr. Bennet has no sons, the estate has to go to the nearest male relative, which is Collins. So when Mr. Bennet dies, the women lose their home.
Exactly. So marrying one of them is his rather awkward solution. He initially eyes Jane.
The prettiest.
Naturally. Yeah. But Mrs. Bennet waves him off, hinting Jane's likely taken, and points him towards Elizabeth.
Which leads to possibly the most awkward proposal in literature. Collins is just brimming with misplaced confidence, right? He tells Elizabeth that with her parents' approval, his proposals will not fail of being acceptable.
He literally cannot conceive of being rejected.
Yeah.
He interprets her refusals as just bashful modesty and the genuine delicacy of her character. He doesn't hear no at all.
Which drives Mrs. Bennet absolutely mad. She insists Elizabeth shall be brought to reason, calls her a headstrong, foolish girl.
But Collins's reaction when Mrs. Bennet complains about Elizabeth's temperament is fascinating. He starts backing off, says if she's really headstrong and foolish, she could not contribute much to my felicity.
Suddenly worried about his own happiness, it shows his supposed generosity is completely self-serving. And then Mr. Bennet steps in with that brilliant line.
The ultimatum. From this day, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
His way of supporting Elizabeth, really. Even though Mrs. Bennet is furious, he's not forcing her.
Oh, she explodes at Elizabeth. Blames her, predicts spinsterhood, worries about money. Who is to maintain you? I have done with you. Nervous complaints. The whole works.
It's pure desperation. Collins, meanwhile, sees his chance to escape gracefully thanks to Mrs. Bennet basically trashing Elizabeth's character for him. He withdraws his suit, talks about resignation to inevitable evils.
So awkward. And then, almost immediately, the twist.
Charlotte Lucas accepts him.
Yes. And the source is brutally honest about why. A pure and disinterested desire of an establishment. It calls marriage the only honorable provision for well-educated young women of small fortune.
There's that pragmatism we talked about. Charlotte knows Collins is ridiculous, neither sensible nor agreeable. His society was irksome. But security trumps everything.
Her family is overjoyed, a most eligible match. They're already thinking about when Mr. Bennet might die so Charlotte can take over Longbourn. It's stark.
And Elizabeth is horrified, astonished. She sees her friend sacrificing every better feeling to worldly advantage. It's humiliating to her.
While Mrs. Bennet reacts with pure, jealous abhorrence towards Charlotte. Now she sees Charlotte as the enemy waiting to kick them out, complaining constantly about the entailment, and Mr. Collins too.
The entailment really is her personal bogeyman. Okay, so after the Collins drama settles, there's another shock. Bingley and his sister suddenly leave Netherfield, gone to London for the winter.
And Miss Bingley's letter makes it sound pretty final. This immediately sets off alarm bells for Elizabeth regarding Jane. She suspects the sisters and Darcy have talked him out of returning. She worries their influence would be successful in keeping him away.
Which casts a real gloom over Longbourn. Mrs. Bennet and Kitty are miserable. Lydia, meanwhile, is probably just getting more hardened in all her folly and assurance.
During this quiet spell, their Aunt Gardiner visits from London. She picks up on Elizabeth's praise of Wickham and becomes a bit suspicious, deciding she needs to warn Elizabeth about the imprudence of the connection.
And Elizabeth's reply is interesting. She says she's not in love with Mr. Wickham at present, admits it's imprudent financially, but then immediately pivots back to Darcy. That abominable Mr. Darcy.
Still blaming him for everything. And speaking of Wickham, we get a hint of his less than charming side. He starts pursuing a Miss King, but only after she inherits a fortune. The text says, he paid her not the smallest attention till her grandfather's death made her mistress of this fortune.
Elizabeth finds that indelicate. A little crack appears in her perfect image of him.
So time passes, spring arrives, and Elizabeth goes to Kent to visit Charlotte, now Mrs. Collins. This puts her right in the path of Mr. Collins's patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
And unexpectedly, Darcy is there too, visiting his aunt.
Mr. Collins is, of course, insufferable, showing off his house, his garden, dropping Lady Catherine's name constantly. Charlotte handles it with impressive composure, that command of countenance.
Then comes the visit to Rosings, Lady Catherine's grand estate. Elizabeth isn't intimidated by the mere stateliness of money and rank.
And Lady Catherine is exactly as advertised. Imperious, interfering, questioning Elizabeth's upbringing. Without a governess, you must have been neglected. Her musical practice, you will never play really well unless you practice more. It's just relentlessly intrusive.
She holds court, basically. And she even questions Darcy about why Bingley left Netherfield so suddenly.
Which leads to a pivotal conversation. Elizabeth talks with Colonel Fitzwilliam, Darcy's cousin, and he casually drops the bombshell that Darcy was chiefly instrumental in separating Bingley and Jane.
He says Darcy had some very strong objections against the lady and implies it was a deliberate strategy, mentioning Darcy's own arts.
This is exactly what Elizabeth suspected. It confirms Darcy's meddling and makes her furious. Your cousin's conduct does not suit my feelings. Why was he to be the judge?
And it's right after hearing this, fueled by fresh indignation, that Darcy chooses to propose to her at Hunsford.
The timing couldn't be worse, and he is utterly confident. The source says his countenance expressed real security. He had no doubt of a favorable answer.
Astonishing self-assurance, given how much she clearly dislikes him. Elizabeth is initially shocked, maybe feels a flicker of pity, but that quickly turns to resentment and anger because of how he proposes.
Oh, the proposal itself is a masterclass in pride. He talks about his struggle to overcome his feelings despite her inferiority of your connections. He actually asks if she expected him to rejoice in relatives whose condition in life is so decidedly beneath my own.
Wow, it's unbelievably arrogant. So her rejection isn't just a no, it's an explosion. She throws his words back at him, saying the way he proposed spared me the concern she might have felt, adding, had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner.
She calls him out on everything Wickham, Jane, and Bingley, his arrogance. It's brutal.
The next day, Darcy finds her and hands her a letter. A long letter.
This letter changes everything. He defends himself, explains his actions. About Bingley and Jane, he says he genuinely believed Jane was indifferent because she was so composed. He admits the Bennet family's behavior, the want of propriety, was a major factor. And crucially, he confesses he deliberately concealed Jane's presence in London from Bingley.
Then comes the Wickham revelation.
The big one. He lays out the truth. Wickham took money instead of the church living, wasted it, life of idleness and dissipation, then demanded the living later and was refused. And the absolute shocker, Wickham tried to elope with Darcy's 15-year-old sister Georgiana, purely for her huge fortune, manipulating her affection.
When Elizabeth reads this, her whole world shifts, doesn't it?
Completely. Shock, regret, shame, and vexation. She realizes she's had been blind, partial, prejudiced, absurd. She sees Darcy's side, Wickham's deceit. Her judgment is utterly overturned.
So while Elizabeth is reeling from this in Kent back home, Lydia gets an invitation.
Yep, from Miss Forster, the colonel's wife, to go with the regiment to Brighton. Lydia and Mrs. Bennet are ecstatic.
Kitty's jealous, naturally. Mr. Bennet, maybe unwisely, agrees. He thinks Lydia's too poor to be an object of prey and hopes Brighton might teach her her own insignificance. He figures she cannot grow many degrees worse.
Famous last words. Elizabeth argues against it, disappointed in his passive approach.
And his judgment proves disastrously wrong. Elizabeth gets a letter from Jane, frantic news. Lydia has eloped with Wickham from Brighton.
Jane's distraught. She has no money, no connections, nothing that can tempt him to... She is lost forever. Begs for their Uncle Gardiner's help.
The family implodes. Mr. Bennet is in excessive distress. Mrs. Bennet is incapacitated, ill, blaming everyone, worrying about duels, and of course, the entailment, the Collinses turning them out.
Jane is overwhelmed trying to manage it all. Kitty's furious with Lydia. Thankfully, Mr. Gardiner immediately steps up, promising help. Elizabeth rushes home.
And just to make things worse, Mr. Collins sends a letter.
Oh, that letter. Pure Collins. Offers condolence, but calls it a grievous affliction. Blames Lydia's licentiousness, hints it's the parents' fault for being too indulgent, or maybe Lydia's just naturally bad.
He's practically gloating about his own marriage to Charlotte, saying how lucky he is not to be involved in all your sorrow and disgrace. Just awful.
In his idea of Christian forgiveness, forgive them, but never to admit them in your sight. Unbelievable lack of compassion.
So Mr. Gardiner goes to London to track them down. Mr. Bennet joins him later. Weeks of agony pass. Then a letter from Mr. Gardiner. They found them. And Wickham has agreed to marry Lydia.
Relief, but also bewilderment. How? Why would Wickham marry her now? Mr. Bennet hits the nail on the head cynically. No man in his senses would marry Lydia on so slight a temptation as 100 a year. He suspects money changed hands.
Elizabeth instantly thinks it must be her uncle. Oh, it must be my uncle's doing. A small sum could not do all this. Mr. Bennet guesses Wickham's price was maybe £10,000.
Jane hopes maybe it's mutual affection. Elizabeth knows better. She knows Lydia had given up to nothing but amusement and vanity. And now she really knows Wickham.
The actual truth comes out later, privately, in a letter from Mrs. Gardiner to Elizabeth. It wasn't just the Gardiners. It was Darcy.
Darcy tracked them down. Darcy paid off Wickham's huge gambling debts, considerably more than £1,000. Darcy gave Lydia another £1,000. Darcy bought Wickham's new commission in the army. He settled everything to ensure the marriage happened and the scandal was contained.
And his reason. According to Mrs. Gardiner, Darcy felt responsible. He told her it was owing to him, to his reserve and want of proper consideration. Wickham's character had been so misunderstood because he hadn't exposed Wickham sooner.
This revelation sends Elizabeth into a complete flutter of spirits. It's overwhelming. Gratitude mixed with the pain of obligation. Her heart whispers that he had done it for her. But her pride rebels at the thought of the connection. Brother-in-law of Wickham.
It's a tangle of emotions, but she has to acknowledge what he did, the sheer generosity, rescuing her family for a girl whom he could neither regard nor esteem. She realizes his feelings for her must still be strong, that his remaining partiality motivated him.
And then Lydia comes home, Mrs. Wickham, completely unchanged, still obsessed with clothes, flirting, telling her sisters Brighton is the place to get husbands.
Elizabeth's reply is dry. I thank you for my share of the favor, but I do not particularly like your way of getting husbands. Lydia writes bragging letters.
And Elizabeth just thinks, oh, thoughtless Lydia.
Yeah.
No lessons learned whatsoever.
Okay, shifting scenes slightly. Before the full truth about Darcy's intervention is known to Elizabeth, she's traveling with the Gardners. And they end up near Pemberley, Darcy's estate.
Yeah, they decide to tour it, thinking he's not home. And as Elizabeth sees the house and grounds, she has this thought, I might have been mistress. But then immediately thinks about how she couldn't have invited her aunt and uncle, concluding it wouldn't have made her happy. It saves her from regret.
Priorities. Then the housekeeper gives this amazing description of Darcy, sweetest-tempered, most generous-hearted boy, a liberal master. Elizabeth is stunned. Can this be Mr. Darcy?
Then bam, they run into Darcy himself. He's arrived early.
And his behavior. Completely different, perfectly well-behaved, polite and unassuming. Civil, attentive, asks about her family.
Elizabeth is floored. Shame and vexation wash over her as she sees this altered behavior, such a contrast to his last address in Rosings Park. The Gardners are also deeply impressed, finding him infinitely superior to their expectations, dismissing Wickham's story.
Right, they see his manner as maybe a little stately, but not proud. This visit shatters their preconceptions. Darcy even brings his shy sister Georgiana to meet them later at their inn. Bingley shows up too.
And the Gardners watch Darcy with Elizabeth and conclude it's evident that he was very much in love with her.
Elizabeth's own feelings are shifting dramatically now. After Pemberley, after the letter, after learning what he did for Lydia, she certainly did not hate him, ashamed of ever feeling a dislike. Respect has grown, deepened by gratitude.
Gratitude, yes. Not merely for having once loved her, but for loving her still well enough to forgive all the petulance and acrimony of her manner in rejecting him. His continued kindness, introducing his sister. It proves his feelings are real, unlike that first arrogant proposal.
So fast forward, Bingley and Darcy return to the neighborhood, visiting Longbourn again. Mrs. Bennet is all over Bingley, super welcoming.
But to Darcy, cold and ceremonious politeness.
Which mortifies Elizabeth. She knows her mother owes Darcy everything. Bingley, meanwhile, is clearly still smitten with Jane, just maybe more guarded. Elizabeth hopes.
Darcy, though, seems to have retreated. He's serious as usual, reserved, quiet, like he was before Pemberley. Elizabeth is disappointed. There's still this awkwardness.
Mrs. Bennet, oblivious, natters on to Bingley about Charlotte's marriage, dropping heavy hints about Jane.
But Bingley doesn't need hints anymore. He finally proposes to Jane, gets Mr. Bennet's blessing.
And Mrs. Bennet's reaction is pure, unadulterated joy, described as an irritation, as violent from delight. All that matters is to know that her daughter would be married was enough.
Bingley later confesses to Elizabeth that the only reason he stayed away was Darcy convincing him Jane was indifferent.
And Jane, sweet Jane, just calls it a little mistake, blaming Bingley's modesty. Elizabeth is just glad Bingley didn't reveal the full extent of Darcy's interference, protects Jane's feelings.
But just as things seem settled, drama arrives in a carriage. Lady Catherine de Bourgh descends upon Longbourn.
In a fury, she doesn't waste time. Your own heart, your own conscience must tell you why I come.
She's heard the rumor. Elizabeth is going to marry Darcy, her nephew. She calls it a scandalous falsehood and demands Elizabeth promise never to marry him.
Will you promise me never to enter into such an engagement?
But Elizabeth, now secure in her feelings and understanding of Darcy, stands her ground. Absolutely refuses. I will make no promise of the kind. I am not to be intimidated. She tells Lady Catherine flat out, you have certainly no right to concern yourself in mine.
It's an amazing moment of Elizabeth asserting herself against this incredibly powerful, arrogant woman.
And of course, a letter from Mr. Collins follows, confirming Lady Catherine is livid and still disapproves because of the Bennet family's connections and Lydia's disgrace.
But Lady Catherine's visit, ironically, does the opposite of what she intended. It gives Darcy hope. It shows him Elizabeth wouldn't be intimidated, that maybe her feelings had changed. So, shortly after, he proposes again.
Second time's the charm. And this time it's completely different. No pride, just sincerity. He says, if your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged.
And Elizabeth accepts. Finally, they talk honestly. He admits his manners were awful before, that he misinterpreted her. He acknowledges the terrible pride of his first proposal, his sense of your inferiority.
He also reveals he told Bingley everything about his interference. Total honesty now. It's the culmination of both their journeys, admitting faults, changing, understanding each other.
The family reactions are predictable. Mr. Bennet is stunned. Darcy, that unpleasant sort of man, he jokes, you are joking, Lizzie. Impossible.
Until Elizabeth convinces him, I love him. Indeed, he has no improper pride. He is perfectly amiable. Mrs. Bennet. Over the moon. Totally forgets she ever disliked Darcy. So different from her reaction to Charlotte and Collins.
Miss Bingley sends fake congratulations. And Lydia. Oh, Lydia sends a letter.
Classic Lydia. Congrats. But then immediately asks for money, suggests Darcy find Wickham a job at court, and adds, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it if you'd rather not.
Just incredible. No growth at all. A perfect final snapshot of her character.
So when you pull all these threads together from the excerpts, you really see this deep exploration of first impressions, don't you? How pride, prejudice, social status just clouding everything initially.
Yeah, and how true character, admitting you were wrong, being willing to change, that's what ultimately matters. We see the harsh realities for women then, the marriage pressures, how families shape us.
And Elizabeth and Darcy's story specifically is this incredible arc from misunderstanding and antagonism to respect, forgiveness, and deep affection. It's about seeing past the surface.
It really makes you pause and think about our own judgments, doesn't it? Looking at these examples, drawn right from the text.
Definitely. It pushes you to consider how often we might get things wrong about people based on, rumors or appearances or just our own biases.
How much do our own bits of pride and prejudice color how we see the world, maybe blinding us sometimes, just like they blinded Elizabeth for so long? It's something that definitely sticks with you.